If you're looking for a job in 2025, you already know how tedious and how oversaturated the market can feel, which is why I'm going to be providing you today a no BS template and steps to follow so you don't have to waste time looking for your next amazing opportunity. I know you're probably sick and tired of all of the BS advice right now circulating the internet, whether it be non-intentional or malicious. So without further ado, let's discuss everything you need to know on how to get hired in 2025. And I'm actually qualified to be speaking to you today about this because not only did I implement these strategies on myself for many years, but I've also helped hundreds of clients land interviews, offers in FANG, big tech, corporate, you name it, we've done it. Without further ado, I'm going to share all of my proven strategies and tips for you to follow right now today. Tip number 1, constructing your bullet point. Every single one of your bullet points must follow this 4-part structure, which is what you did, how you did it, solution, result. If your bullet points sound like streamlined operational efficiency by 22% in order to increase stakeholder engagement and inform decision making, and that was your entire bullet point, give or take a few details, that is the reason why you're not getting interviews or offers. I've seen this bullet point written out in a million different shapes and forms. The problem is you're not telling recruiters, the hiring team, anything about what you accomplished. And I don't blame you. There's a ton of misinformation out there telling you over-tailor your resume to every single job description and boom, you're gonna find a job like that. Come on. Like, if everyone's doing that and you're only bringing in vague, generic, generalized language, why would that get you a job? Just think about it logically. If you are trying to find a job with a great salary, something that's not going to just keep you in survival mode, but something that can make you feel comfortable so you can actually dream again and do the things you've always wanted to do. You want to be able to show yourself as the top candidate. And if you are competing with people in this job market who have followed the same generic advice and utilize job description generic language within their bullet points on their resumes, what makes you think that that's going to make you stand out? So when they say 2025, it's so oversaturated, it's terrible. I've worked with a lot of people who have gone through so many terrible things because of layoffs and unemployment and like loans and credit card. Like, I'm not discrediting the amount of hardship that people are going through right now, but part of that is to blame the misinformation and the continuation of this terrible advice. Like, I'll tell you right now, when I was going in as a sophomore trying to find an internship, my career center was telling me the same thing. And that was many years ago. If everyone's following this generic advice, what makes you think that you're going to be able to stand out in this market when everything is more challenging and more competitive with others who are following the exact same advice that you have already implemented? So what happens is, yes, you could be passing ATS. I'm sure you are. There are 2 steps to pass ATS, and one of them is passing through the AI and the machine and all that pre-screening, but you're not passing the recruiter, the actual human that you feel like if only they looked and they saw you, they could give you a chance, and that's why you're spending all that time networking. Like, that's not going to give you the in. If recruiters are rejecting you and you've already applied to hundreds of jobs, I can almost guarantee that ATS is letting you come through, especially if you've tailored your resume and implemented all of these skills and tools and softwares and you already have that. There's no reason why you can't pass ATS. What's happening is you're not passing the actual person. So imagine we've let in an entire generation of job seekers who are following this exact same advice, the misinformation of over-tailor. And if you have people with the exact same language, streamlining operational efficiency, launching this in order to boost productivity, like, that's not going to get you the job because you are using the generic job description language. Therefore, how can the actual hiring team understand what you did on the job if you have no details? Here are some things to keep in mind when creating a really detailed and approached bullet point. When writing what you did, the first part of the bullet point, make sure you take this detailed approach in order to be able to share exactly the story, the context of what you were able to solve within your company. Things to keep in mind would be the company type. You can keep in mind the number of industries you worked with, the number of clients. You can give a project overview. You could share the problem and the approach that you want to take. You can even discuss the number of teams internally or externally that you worked with in order to make this X, Y, and Z project come to life. Lastly, bring up the features, what you had to implement as part of your project. And I'm sure you've been involved in multiple milestones and checkpoints across a project. This could be the brainstorm, the ideation, the designing, prototyping, all the way to the coding or the data analysis, the post-production tracking, like whatever that might have been. I'm sure you've done quite a bit of work in each step. So you can break that down in multiple different bullet points and talk about one area at a time. Here are some examples that you can reference that would be able to visualize some of these things. You could start it off by saying, served as a key point of contact for 75 clients. And then the rest would be the how, solution, result, etc., etc. Oversaw preparation of 200 plus reports. Collaborated with 5 cross-functional teams, including finance, marketing, etc., in order to supported onboarding of 15 plus new hires across 3 months in order to So notice how different it is between streamlined operational efficiency. Like no one knows what that is. If you are doing the streamlining of operational efficiency, tell us what that operation was that made efficient. So if you're talking about supported onboarding of 15 plus new hires, that is part of an operation. And the fact that you were able to do that shows you were able to efficiently get them ramped up and ready. Rather than leaning into the vague language, focus in exactly what you did in all of your responsibilities. It doesn't even matter if you did something one time. If you felt like that was significant, add it to your resume. Now that we covered what you did, the next part of crafting a detailed bullet point is going to be the how you did it. Now, which leads us to the next part, which is arguably one of the most important parts of writing a bullet point. And yes, I would argue it's actually more valuable than the solution and the result part of a bullet point. And this is the part where you should be actually really careful, because the what you did it might be deceiving. Like you might be like, oh, I already listed what I did. But the point is, we're not trying to have a laundry list of everything you did. We want to make sure that everything you have has a proof, has a backup of, hey, if you were to give me a project similar to this, I know how to implement it using these X, Y, and Z strategies. So some things to think about are the target users, how you research something, the steps that went into the designing or the development of the product. Who are the clients that you're working with to be able to transfer this ownership to make X, Y, and Z things happen for them? AKA, if there is a problem that a client is experiencing, why do they come to you, and how does your product help them make X, Y, and Z different changes in their company? And last but not least, this is quite arguably the most important part of not only just ATS, but for the recruiter as well. You have to include all the tools, softwares, coding languages, platforms, whatever you did in this bullet point in accordance to what you did. So don't just list everything like I said, but you have to make sure it's relevant. This is where I see a lot of people get wrong, because they think that at the end of the day, they could just list all of their tools, softwares in their skills section at the bottom or wherever you like to put it. But that doesn't help anyone, because if a recruiter is looking at it, they're going to be like, great, you have this, but it seems like you just copied and pasted things and just put it on there. So we think that you know how to use it. But if your bullet points don't have that, how can they know you know how to use Python or Java or Excel or Tableau? Like, you have to be able to demonstrate that you know how to use it. Here are some examples that you can use when crafting your how you did it part of your bullet point. For instance, when crafting a bullet point, you can mention what you did, but you can also mention the how as part of the number of locations this was influencing, across how many different campaigns, which industries were these things influencing, how did you execute this? So you can think about the number of meetings you would have on a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis. What would go on in those checkpoints and touch points between emails and calls? For instance, if you're talking about report generation as part of your what, you could talk about all the different details you were able to gather to make a comprehensive report. You could share that you listed SEO content, metadata, ad tracking, engagement, different optimization tasks, areas for growth, the number of different teams you had to collaborate with to get this information. Because as we know, when you're working in corporate, nothing you do will ever be just you. You will always have other people to lean on. If you're talking about providing actionable insights, tell us what those insights were, how you figured that out. Who did you have to speak to, whether it be clients or internal team members or research that you had to do independently to get this information? How did you identify areas for growth? What were the areas of growth? Because think about it like this. Corporate only knows what you tell them, so they don't know what they don't know. Okay, so they can't say, oh, I want to hire this person because I want to take a chance on them. They had a job title that we have been looking for and they've held this position for this many years. They must know how to do this thing that we need them to do. But, we didn't say on the resume, and I'm sure they would be able to pull this off. We actually didn't even ask during an interview because, it wasn't on the resume. So there's not really an area for conversation. Do you see the problem? Do you actually see how if people don't know that you know how to do something, they're going to automatically assume that that's not part of your skill set? They might ask you other compelling questions, but until you remember and tell them yourself, it will never be something that they assume you know. But typically, I gave a very optimistic example. They're going to go for someone and interview that person that actually wrote it out, So they're not going to go in and guess and be super optimistic about every single person and be like, I think they would be able to answer these questions or do the job. They only interview people that they think can do the job. So this could be a good or a bad perspective depending on, where you're at in your job search. If you do get an interview and you're worried about not being able to pass it, or you're worried that you have no relevant skill sets, remember, they're not going to interview someone and waste their own time. That's crazy. But also, if you apply to a position and 100% you could have done the job, you've done it every single day for the last 5 years in your previous jobs, if you're not getting interviews and you could have done it, actually think about this, because if you are not, that means they probably don't think you could do the position. So yes, there are other factors, it was an internal hire or the job closed, something happened. So they will only give out interviews to those that they know it could do the job, which is why when you talk about how you did something, you really want to emphasize all the details, the areas of growth that you identified, how you were able to insert yourself in different situations, how many different people you were able to give presentations to, what they did with that knowledge, etc., etc. The next piece is going to be writing an effective solution to all of your bullet points. The number one reason why you get a task in corporate is because there's a goal, and you are part of the puzzle piece to be able to accomplish that bigger goal. Corporate really typically has a few main goals: earning more money, acquiring new clients, and retaining their existing clients. Another thing that you could do is find actual statistics behind a platform you use. So for example, if your job is to implement SEO strategies on your client's website, you could actually pull that up, filter the metrics, and see the number of growth you were able to achieve in X number of months, so in what timeline and by what percentage. Also, you want to be careful with percentages, because if you're talking about a 15% growth, no one really knows what that means. So if you're able to, and you don't have an NDA sign, and you're able to have that more flexible approach, you can actually list the numbers. You could say, it used to be 100 before and now it's 115. So 15%, 20%, these percentages don't really have value unless you put some context behind it with some actual numbers. So as a result, not everything that you put in your solution has to be a direct representation of how many clients you were able to increase, how much you were able to retain. It's more so the route you take to be able to achieve that. Another one could be receiving 100,000 responses in surveys across Latin America, North America, Asia, and Europe in order to implement across X, Y, and Z areas of the product development. And there's going to be other mini things that go along the way, marketing has their own specific tasks to be able to achieve that kind of one of the three goals. Finance will have their own, sales will have their own, supply chain will have their own. So the way you do a task is probably going to hit one of three areas. And I don't expect you to know the ins and outs of what your company was able to accomplish, how much money you were able to help them gain, how many different clients. That's typically something that's not shared to a typical individual contributor. But at the end of the day, if you're doing something for a marketing campaign in this area for these reasons, you probably know it's to acquire new customers and to earn more money. But most importantly, it's the way you took that route to be able to do so. That is the middle point that a lot of people are skipping over. People always jump to the very latter, which is earning the company 20% more revenue, and they can't even answer that in an interview because they kind of just guessed, or they don't even have the proof to be able to back that up, or they lean too generically and they'd say increasing productivity, boosting operational efficiency, boosting stakeholder engagement and insights. That's too vague. What you want to lean on is the middle part, the route you had to take, because there's a million different ways that you could take a route in corporate to be able to achieve that one of 3 goals. It could be building client relationships and improving their year-over-year growth that made them sign their contract with you 5 different times. Them signing X number of times with you is a clear indication of client retention. If you have created exceptionally well campaigns that have aligned with the client's goals, that means you got them closer to their own lead generations and prospects and all of the closes that they were able to do on their end. Thus, you were able to not only retain your client, but you were able to help them acquire new ones. Does that make sense? Last but not least, we have the result. Now, the result is the cherry on top, and you may not have these stats. This typically goes hand in hand with the solution, but if you are more junior in your role, or if you don't know what these stats are and no one shared them with you, it's important to incorporate metrics throughout your bullet point. So the number of clients, the number of team members, across what timeline, right? Remember all those? So if you have a metric at the end, it's perfect, but if you do not have it, it's totally okay. You could say contributing to a 97% average contribution to client retention, 170 plus increase in website clicks and engagement, ensuring timely delivery of 100 plus client reports across the next 6 months, launching X, Y, and Z project across the next 6 months while handling a $200,000 budget and saving $50,000 in redundant costs. If you enjoyed this video and you want a more personalized approach, we'd be more than happy to provide a free resume review. Just book a call with the link below in the description, and we'd be happy to go over your resume during the call. We'll cover your responsibilities, discuss better approaches, and we'd also throw in a free mock interview as well so you can assess where you are across your job search. Don't forget to follow along on all of our social media handles, and make sure you subscribe, like the video, and comment any questions you may have, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye!